إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. ثم أما بعد. Alhamdulillah ala ni'matil Islami wa Sunnah. All praise and thanks belong to Allah for guiding us to Islam and for guiding us to the Sunnah. We continue going over the tremendous book by the Fadilat al-Shaykh Al-Allama Imam bin Baz rahimahullahu ta'ala. The book which is entitled Durus al-Muhimma li'amat al-Ummah, important lessons for the general masses of the Ummah. We have reached Ad-Dars As-Sabi', the seventh lesson, which is surrounding the arkan of the salah, arkanus salah, the pillars of the prayer. وقال إمام بن باز رحمه الله تعالى الدرس السابع, the seventh lesson, arkanus salah, the pillars of the prayer. Arkanus salah here أربعة عشر, the pillars of the prayer, they are 14 in number. They are 14 in number. The first of them is القيام مع القدرة, is standing with the ability, meaning that if an individual has the ability to stand, then they must stand. وتكبيرة الإحرام, and the opening takbir. وقراءة القرآن والقراءة الفاتحة عفوا والقراءة الفاتحة, and the reading of Al-Fatiha, the opening chapter of the Qur'an. والركوع, and bowing. والاعتدال بعد الركوع, and standing after the bowing. والسجود على الأعضاء السبعة, and prostrating upon the 7 limbs. ورفع منه, and coming up from the prostration. والجلسة بين السجدتين, and the sitting between the 2 prostrations. وطمأنينة في جميع الأفعال, and to have ease in all of the actions. To have ease and be at ease in all of the actions. نعم. والترتيب بين الأركان, and to bring the order of the actions. So the actions of the prayer, they have to be brought in order, in their order. والتشهد الأخير, and the final tashahhud. والجلوس له, and sitting for it. والصلاة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, and sending the salah upon the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. نعم. وتسليمتان, and the 2 taslims, يعني to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Naam, to make the taslim at the end of the prayer. These are the pillars of the prayer. وقال فضيلة الشيخ عبد الرزاق بن شيخ عبد المحسن العباد البدر حفظهم الله تعالى, he mentions, he says, الركن الركن, a pillar or the pillar, هو جانب الشيء الأقوى الذي لا قيام له إلا عليه. A pillar, it is something that comes in proximity to something else that is stronger. Naam, the pillar, it is something that comes in proximity to something else that it is stronger. Naam, of which that thing in which it is a pillar for will not be established except upon it. It will not be established except upon its pillar. Naam, and hence why these 14 affairs have been called pillars of the salah. Because if they are not there, then the salah, it will not stand. Naam, if they are not there, then the salah, it will not stand. وانتفاء الركن, and the removal of the rukn, يبطل به العمل, then the action will be rendered null and void. If the pillar is not there, then the action, it will not be established. Naam. So if the pillar is removed, then the action will be invalid. The action will be invalid. Now I want us to reflect on what we're speaking about. We're speaking about the salah, right? We're talking about the prayer, and the prayer is tremendously important. And if these 14 things are not there, then our prayer will not count. Then our prayer, it will not count. So this is something that it is extremely vital that we know in depth and in detail what are the pillars of the prayer, so that we may establish them, because we want our prayers to count. We want our prayers to count. على كل حال لا يسقط عمدا ولا سهوا ولا جهلا. The pillars of the prayer, they cannot be omitted. They cannot be omitted. Not purposely, not due to forgetfulness, and not due to ignorance. They cannot be omitted. Not purposely, not forgetfully, and not due to ignorance. Meaning that if they are not established, none of these things will be an excuse. In other words, if they're not established and we purposely don't do them, then our prayer doesn't count. If we forget them, then, as aforementioned in previous classes, then we have to bring them. If we forget them, then we have to bring them. You cannot make the prostration of forgetfulness to repair the omission of a pillar. No, but rather you have to do what? You have to bring that pillar. You have to bring that pillar in order for the salah to count. Okay? Likewise, out of ignorance, if the one prays upon this way and they are ignorant, then this is not an excuse. This is not an excuse. A person says, well, I didn't know. That's not an excuse from the standpoint of what? Is that we are commanded to seek knowledge. We are commanded to seek knowledge over those things that are obligatory upon each and every individual. Those things that are an individual obligation upon you, you have to seek knowledge as relates to them. So seeking knowledge as relates to the prayer is a must. There's no excuse. No one is excused from having to seek knowledge as relates to their prayer when they have the ability to do so. There's no excuse for you. Okay? You learn other things, you know about other things, so there's no excuse for you. You have to know about your prayer. So this is unexcusable, and this is what we understand. This is what is understood from the likes of this expression, that is unexcusable. You have to know what are the pillars of the prayer. You have to know how to pray correctly. لأن العبادة لا تقوم إلا على أركانها, because actions, ibadah, worship, they are not established except upon their pillars. Naam, an act of worship is not established except upon its pillars. So we have to know what are the pillars of the acts of worship, what is necessary from those things that are necessary that have to be done in order to establish an act of worship, and thus upon that are the acts of worship established. And if these pillars are not there, then that act will be rendered null and void. It will not count. It will not count. But the Shaykh Hafidhullah Ta'ala goes on, he says, كما أن البيت لا يقوم إلا على أركانها. He said, just like a house, it is not set up, it is not established except upon its pillars. If you remove the foundational structure of a house, the house will collapse. If you remove the foundational frame of a house, then the house, it will collapse. Without its supporting structure, its foundational frame of the house, then what? The house will collapse. It will fall down. The walls will fall in, and the roof will tumble down. So, just like a house will crumble down if its pillars are not established, then likewise, an act of worship of whose pillars are not established, then it will not stand. It will fall down, meaning it will not count. It will be invalid. فإذا زال ركن من أركان البيت, if a pillar from the pillars of the house is removed, انهدم, it falls down, is destroyed. فالصلاة لا تقوم إلا على أركانها, and thus the prayer, it is not established except upon its pillars. The prayer is not established except upon its pillars. وهي أربعة عشر ركنا, and they are 14 pillars. The first of these pillars is القيام مع القدرة. It is standing when one has the ability to stand. It is to stand in the prayer when one has the ability to stand. So if one has the ability to stand up when he prays, then he has to stand. وَبَدَأَ بِهِ مُؤَلِّفْ رَحِمُ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, and the author, he began with this pillar لِأَنَّهُ سَابِقٌ عَلَى جَمِيعِ الْأَرْكَانِ, because it precedes all of the other arkan. All of the other arkan, this is the first one, it comes first. So because it proceeds and it comes first, then it is mentioned first. Because it proceeds and it comes first, then it is mentioned first. فَمَنْ كَانَ قَادِرًا عَلَى الْقِيَامِ وَصَلَّى صَلَاتَهُ الْمَكْتُوبَةِ جَالِسًا لَمْ تَصِحْ صَلَاتُهُ, and whoever has the ability to stand, but they willfully and out of choice choose to pray their obligatory prayer sitting down, then their prayer, it is not correct. It is not correct. It does not count. It is invalid. Why? Because they have the ability to stand, but they chose to sit down. In the obligatory prayers, you have to pray them standing if you have the ability. As relates to the voluntary prayers, then you have the option in the voluntary prayers to pray sitting. Now, you have the option to pray sitting, but the reward is what is reduced. It's not the same as if you were to pray it standing. And this is in the case where you have the choice, meaning in voluntary prayers, where you have the choice between sitting and standing. Now, in the voluntary prayers, if you sit because of a lack of ability to stand, then you get the full reward. Now, in any event, in the obligatory prayers, you have to stand. If you do not stand in the obligatory prayers when you have the ability, then that prayer, it will not count. لأن القيام ركن ما دام قادرا عليه, because standing is a condition, is a pillar, standing is a pillar as long as the individual has the ability to do so. As long as the individual has the ability to do so, then they must stand inside of the prayer. وقال الله تعالى, and Allah Ta'ala, he says, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى وقوموا لله قانتين. Allah Ta'ala, he says, what translated means, and take care of the prayer. Maintain your prayer, meaning your obligatory prayers, and take care of them. Preserve them, protect them by establishing them the way they should be established. Naam. And safeguard and protect the middle prayer. And safeguard and protect the middle prayer. Naam. The ulama of tafsir, they say what is meant by the middle prayer is Salatul Asr. Salatul Asr. Naam. And to safeguard and protect the middle prayer. Naam. And for those who have the ability and the time to study this particular ayah, and as the difference of opinion as relates to what is salat, what is salat al-wusta, what is intended by what salat al-wusta in the ayah, then there's a lot of benefit, as relates to what is the middle prayer. There's a lot of benefits as to what is the middle prayer, and when one reads through the tafsir of this ayah, then they would walk away understanding the extreme importance of the prayer itself. Naam. So inshallah ta'ala, for those who have the ability, this will be a good exercise, some good bonus work to go and to research, inshallah ta'ala. There's a lot of fruit and benefit in that. Thus, the point here is that Allah Ta'ala, He says in this ayah, وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ, and stand before Allah devoutly and devoutly obedient. Stand in front of Allah with devout obedience. Naam. So Allah Ta'ala in this ayah that can be found in Surah Al-Baqarah, and this verse 238, He tells us and He commands us to stand inside of the prayer. To stand inside of the prayer, and that is the point of reference, and why this ayah was mentioned. We have to stand inside of the prayer. وفي الحديث مسيء صلاته, and in the hadith of the one who he prayed badly, he had his prayer wasn't good. قال, the Prophet ﷺ, he said to him when teaching him how to pray, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَكَبِّرْ, and when you stand for the prayer, then make takbir. Naam. When you stand for the prayer, then make takbir. And this hadith is mutafiqun alayh, from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So here we have another proof and evidence that inside of the prayer, then we have to what? We have to stand up inside of the prayer. As the Prophet ﷺ, he told him, إِذَا قُمْتَ, when you have stood, إِذَا قُمْتَ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ, when you stood for the prayer. So you have to stand up in the prayer for those who have what? The ability. وفي الحديث, in another hadith, قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, صلي قائما, he said, pray standing. فإن لم تستطيع, and if you are unable to pray standing, فقاعدا, then pray sitting. Naam. And thus we see why Imam bin Baz rahimahullah ta'ala and the ulama in general, the ulama that mention the arkan al-salah, they make it very clear, al-qiyam ma'al-qudra, that standing when you have the ability, that you stand when you have the ability. Because as far as standing, then we see the proofs and the evidences, or some of the proofs and the evidences, which points us to the fact that we have to stand when we pray. Okay? But now the issue of, and if you can't stand, what do you do? That standing has been linked to one's ability, right? Where do we get that understanding from? Well, we know their texts, inshallah ta'ala, we'll mention some of them in general, but there are also specific texts which points us to the fact that when it comes to the prayer specifically, if you do not have the ability to stand, then you sit. As we find here in this hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he said, "Salli qa'iman," pray standing. فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ, and if you cannot, فَقَاعِدًا, then pray sitting. Naam. So the default in the prayer is to stand. If you're incapable of standing due to an ailment, due to whatever the case is, right? Due to an injury, right? Due to any type of disability, so on and so forth, then you sit down. Naam. فَإِذَا كَانَ قَادِرًا عَلَى الْقِيَامِ, لا بد أن يصلي قائما. If you have the ability to stand, and remember, we're speaking about the obligatory prayers. If you have the ability to stand, then you must pray standing. نعم. فإذا كان غير قادرا على القيام صلى جالسا. And if you are incapable of standing, then you will pray sitting. If you cannot stand up, then you sit down, no problem. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in his hadith that has been collected by Al-Bukhari, and it's from the hadith of Imran bin Hussein, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَائِدًا. And if you cannot pray while standing, then pray while sitting. فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ. And if you cannot pray sitting, فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. Then you pray laying down on one of your sides. Then you pray laying down and the like. So we see here from this narration that what? That when it comes to the prayer, like when it comes to other acts of worship, we establish them based upon one's ability. We establish them based upon our ability. اتق الله ما استطعت. Fear Allah to the best of your ability. Okay? So, in general, we fear Allah to the best of our ability. When it comes to the prayer, we have specific texts that point us to the fact that we have to stand. If we are unable to stand, then we sit. If we are incapable of praying while sitting due to an ailment or so on and so forth, an injury and the like, then we pray while laying on our side. And then we have the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Shaykh, he mentions, he says, وَقَدْ قَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. And Allah ta'ala, he says, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. And fear Allah to the best of your ability. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah to the best of your ability. As it can be found in Surah At-Taghabun, and is verse 16. So standing in the prayer is a pillar from the pillars of the prayer. If one is incapable of standing, then they are to sit down. If one is incapable of sitting down, then they are to lay down. And the proof of that is clear, as it comes in the hadith of Imran bin Hussein, collected by Al-Bukhari, clearly mentions this. And in general, we have the general principle as it relates to all of the acts of worship in general, and that is that what? That we fear Allah to the best of our ability. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah to the best of your ability. The Shaykh, he mentions a point that we should take into serious consideration, right? And that is, he says, وَمِنَ الْمُلَاحَظَةِ على البعض المصلين ومن الملاحظ على البعض المصلين أنه يدخل المسجد. A point that one should take attention to, and he wants to draw one's attention to, is that it should be noted that some of the people who pray, they will enter into the masjid. They will walk into the masjid. ثم يذهبوا إلى الأماكن المخصصة للكراسي, and then they will go to the place where the chairs are held, the place where the chairs are stored. ويأخذ واحدة منها, and he will take a chair. ثم يضعه في مكانه من الصف, then he will put it in the place where he's going to stand inside of the row. ثم يجلس, then he sits down. ويكبر تكبيرة الإحرام وهو جالس, and then he sits down and he makes the takbir, the opening takbir, and he's sitting down. مع أنه, this is coupled with the fact, مع أنه دخل المسجد ماشيا, that he came into the masjid walking. Right? Understand the scenario. They walk into the masjid, they walk over to the place where they store the chairs, they take a chair, they walk to the row that they're going to be in, they put the chair there, they get it ready, then they stand in front of the chair, sit down, then make takbiratul ihram, and they sitting down. Coupled with the fact that they walked into the masjid, right? They walked into the masjid. وهو يعني وجد رفيقا له نعم ولو excuse me that he walked into the masjid ولو وجد رفيقا له, and if he were to find a friend of his نعم أو صاحبا, or يعني if he find a friend or acquaintance of his, ربما وقف معه تحدث قائما, even if he were to find a friend of his, he might stand and talk with him for a little bit, right? He find a friend of his, he might stand or talk with him for a little bit, or he runs into someone in the masjid. They will stand there for however long a period of time, and they will stand there and talk with their friend, or talk with their associate, or talk with whoever they ran into inside of the masjid. فَعِنْدَهُ قُدْرَ عَلَى الْقِيَامِ. So this points us to the fact that they have the ability to stand. You see? They have the ability to stand. Now, some of the other actions of the prayer may be problematic for them. Okay? However, the standing, they have the ability to stand. They may not have the ability to make ruku', or they may not have the ability to make sujood, to get up and down without great difficulty or hurting themselves, but they can stand there. They can stand there. Okay? But the Shaykh, he says, وَمَعَ ذَلِكَ يُصَلِّي جَالِسًا. But with this, he still prays sitting down. Even with all of this, they still pray sitting down. وَعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. وَلِهَذَا يَنْبَغِي عَلَى مَنْ كَانَ عَلَى هَذِهِ الصِّفَةِ يَدْخُلُ الْمَسْجِدِ مَاشِيًا وَيَأْخُذُ كُرْسِيًّا ثُمَّ أَقَلَّ مِنْ أَنْ يُكَبِّرَ تَكْبِيرَةَ الْإِحْرَامِ وَهُوَ قَائِمًا. He said, is that a person who, this is his description, this is their situation, this scenario fits them, that they will enter into the masjid walking, they will take a chair and position it, and so on and so forth. Then the least of what they can do, the Shaykh is saying, is that they should make the takbiratul ihram while they are standing up. While standing there, they should make the takbir. فَإِذَا شَعَرَ أَنَّهُ بِحَاجَةٍ إِلَى الْجُلُوسِ. And if he feels that he needs to sit down, then after that, وَلَا سِيَّمَا إِذَا كَانَ فِي الْقِيَامِ إِطَالَةٍ شَيْءٍ مَا يَجْلِسِ. He said, especially if it's the fact where the recital, it becomes long and they're reciting for a long time, then they should sit down. Right? So they should open the prayer while standing, and if they feel the need to sit down, then after that, then they should sit down. But they should at least start the prayer standing. نعم. وأما هكذا من أول صلاته يبدأ وهو جالس وقد جاء ماشيا حتى اختار مكان وهيأه وجلس فيه فمثل هذا ينبغي أن يتنبه له. He said, but as far as the case where a person, from the beginning of his salah, he starts it while sitting down, while at the same time they came walking to the masjid, they picked their place, they got their area together, and prepared where they were going to sit, and then they sit down in it, and then pray sitting down for the whole time like that. The Shaykh says, then the likes of this, then it is a must that this be brought to their attention. It is a must that this here be brought to their attention. Now, is that if you have the ability to stand, then stand. And once it becomes difficult to remain standing, then sit down. Or if you know from your own situation that bowing is going to be difficult and so on and so forth, then at least begin your prayer while standing and then sit down. Now, don't just sit from the first thing, and you have the ability to stand. Fear Allah to the best of your ability. And those who are not able to stand even for this duration, then no problem. We understand that. That's something that is different. But if you have the ability to stand, you came there walking, and you can stand, and you can stand, and you can stand, then stand in the salah. Then stand in the salah. And then the Shaykh, he goes on to the next pillar. But inshallah ta'ala, we'll leave that until the next class. فنكتفي بهذا القدر. صلى الله عليه وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وجزاكم الله خيرا.